We're going to get started here in just a minute, folks. Going to let everybody show up. I'm going to make all my fellow speakers co-hosts here. And we'll give you a rundown of who's going to be speaking, etc. here in just a few minutes. If you're a reporter, please update your name to include your organization. We are recording this to share with folks that aren't able to make it. All right, one last speaker to make a co-host. I wish I had hold music for you all. All right. We are just going to get started here in one moment. It looks like everybody's arrived. Folks, please save your questions till the end. Put them in the Q&A. If you're not a reporter, please just listen. We know that the link got out to a couple folks that are not reporters. This is meant specifically for the press. We'll answer questions for the press and then in the Q&A, please. Or you can come off mute and ask. We're going to start with a quick overview of where things stand, and then from there we will go. First, I'm going to give you. I'm going to paste into the chat the names of the speakers and their sort of their role, and the run of show that you can expect. There you go. Think I've got all my speakers here. Sure do. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, folks. My name is Sean Van Diver. I lead AfghanEvac. My name is spelled. You have my name in the chat there. But for the record, my name is spelled ShawnVandiver, and that's all one word, capital V, capital D. I'm going to set the stage for us a little bit, and then I'm going to lay out sort of what this looks like, and talk about current state, and then what yesterday's news meant, and what we can expect to see from here. And then we'll move on down the line. I'm going to even present here. Share. Over here. And we are recording this, so if you need the recording, just let me know. All right. So, you all can see my screen? Yes, you can. So the current state is that there have been 195,000 Afghans resettled since August of 2021 through what's called, well, through various. Here you go. We're going to get you here. Operation Allies Refuge was the flights for Afghan SIVs out of Kabul up to August 30th, 2021. Operation Allies Welcome was the effort to welcome and resettle around 80,000 Afghans following the evacuation, and then several thousand Afghans between Allies Welcome and Enduring Welcome. Enduring Welcome began in October 2022, and it was the multi-year end-to-end strategy that AfghanEvac worked with the White House and the last administration to relocate SIVs, P1, P2 refugees, IV, sort of both consular and refugee track folks. You may or may not know, and you can get those graphics that you saw earlier. from our website. The State Department currently has a process by which they intake applications for both refugees, for both consular track and refugee track. They process them, they do a bunch of vetting, which I'll show you graphics on, and then they relocate Afghans to a third country, Albania, Qatar, others, undergo some more processing and vetting, and then come here. Now, the reason for that is that Afghans are not exactly in a place that is friendly to them, right? Afghans who stood with us are not in a place that is friendly to us. That was all functioning smoothly. There were about 5,000 Afghans leaving a month. And then President Trump issued those day one executive orders. 14163 was the US RAP executive order. That stopped all refugee cases in their tracks. No refugees can move P1, P2, P3, P4, or DS 4317 family reunification for parolees. The Secretaries of State and Homeland Security are able to issue case-by-case exemptions, but they have not been clear about how to get those. Executive Order 14169 functionally stopped the SIV program because it stopped reception and placement here in the United States, so the resettlement benefits that people get when they arrive. It also stopped the assurances that the ability for a resettlement agency to say, yes, we got them, and for IOM to issue a flight loan to Afghans who were leaving, which meant that there could be no more flights from Afghanistan. There could be no more relocation flights. It also stopped all of these services down here on the bottom. Happy to answer questions about that if that's relevant to you all. The current state of SIVs is that intake of application can still happen. Chief of mission adjudications can still happen. And this is breaking news. There are 1,000 decisions happening every week, thanks to the Enduring Welcome program. Afghans can apply for visas. They cannot get relocation assistance. They can't get taken from Afghanistan to a third country. And it's really important that you note that that piece is important because after our withdrawal, there's no presence, there's no U.S. presence there. So they can't go to the embassy and get a visa, do an interview, all of that. Afghanistan is one of the very few countries in the world that is true of, and the only country in the world in which we have a population to whom we owe a great debt. They cannot get flight loans or post-arrival support. Those are the graphics that I wanted to show you. Now I'll talk through a little bit of what we have to say here. So thank you all for being here. We are here today because the Trump administration is actively dismantling Enduring Welcome. Reuters yesterday broke that CARE had been directed to make plans to shut down their relocation platforms and move people out of their housing in Afghanistan and Pakistan by April of 2025. Their plans for that are supposed to go up today to Secretary Rubio. On day one, the administration issued executive orders that paused refugee admissions and froze foreign aid, halting key programs that supported Afghan relocation. At the time, we were told that this was temporary, that the administration just needed time to review the process. But now we know the truth. The State Department has been directed to draw up plans for a permanent shutdown. This is not a pause. This is not a review. This is a deliberate decision to abandon over 200,000 people who served alongside our mission. And make no mistake about it, every single person in the consular track and the refugee track is somebody who stood up for the idea of America and is now at risk because of that stance, because of the action that they took. The infrastructure that we built, folks on this call, veterans, to keep America's word is being dismantled in real time. The work that thousands of veterans, frontline civilians, and government officials fought for is potentially being tossed aside. And it's not just about Afghans. This is about America's integrity. So let's talk a little bit about what's at stake. 40,000 Afghans have already completed vetting and are ready to travel in Afghanistan right now, but they have no pathway forward. There are 50,000 Afghans in third countries around the world who will be stranded, stuck in limbo with no safe options. There are 15,000 Afghans in Pakistan who are vetted and approved for refugee status, waiting on flights that may never restart. There are 3,000 immediate family members of active duty U.S. service members, Americans troops, children, American troops, children, parents, siblings. They're being left behind. 10,000 individuals are seeking family reunification, including 3,000 family members of unaccompanied minors right here in the United States who may never see their family again. They have no way to safety. This is not just a list. These are human lives. People who believed in us. People who trusted that America would keep its promises. People who stood beside our troops, fought beside our troops, and now face death because of that loyalty. And now, with one stroke of the pen, we're erasing them. We've heard that people are concerned about costs. We spent $2.23 trillion on the war in Afghanistan. That's $300 million per day for 20 years. And now, at the very moment when we have the opportunity to close this war the right way, we're being told that helping those who served alongside us is too expensive. Listen, I was running around state one day and I saw a figure on a computer. $18,000 per person for a relocation. That seems like a pretty good deal to get somebody medically screened, security screened, out of Kabul once, to a third country, into the United States for after more screening and medical and immigration screening. That's a deal. And that includes the resettlement benefits on this side. So it's nonsense, right? The total cost of enduring welcome is a fraction of what we spent in Afghanistan. It costs more to break this system than it does to keep it running. We have infrastructure in the Philippines right now that I think cost us $50 million to build. 160 Afghans went through it, and this administration is shutting that down. It's unconscionable. Veterans, nonprofit organizations, and volunteers have carried this mission on our backs for 3 years. Now the government is suddenly saying it's unaffordable? I haven't cost the government a thing. Neither is anybody on this call. This isn't about money, it's about priorities. The cost of keeping our promise is pennies compared to what we spent on the war. But the cost of breaking our promise, that will be measured in lives lost, future conflicts, and America's credibility. We're almost done here, folks. Veterans fought tooth and nail to build enduring welcome. We did what the government failed to do after the withdrawal. We, in conjunction with the last administration, built the infrastructure that worked. We dragged the Biden administration to the right place and forced them to take responsibility. We kept our word to our wartime allies. Now this new administration on day one is tearing it all down. We thought that that was a mistake. We thought they didn't mean to do it. But now it's starting to seem like it's intentional. To every veteran who made a promise to an Afghan ally, this decision is a punch in the gut. We were told no one gets left behind. We were told if you serve with us, we will stand by you. We were told America keeps its promises. Well, Stephen Miller is about to make a liar out of every veteran who worked to aid an Afghan ally in need. And it's not just the veterans who served in Afghanistan who feel this betrayal. Active duty U.S. service members are watching their own families be abandoned. Some in Afghanistan, some in Pakistan, and some in U.S. government-run platforms. Just stuck there. Imagine being deployed overseas, serving your country, and learning that your wife and children, who were promised relocation, are now being left behind in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, or worse, being returned to Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. This is un-American. This is not just about doing the right thing. This is about U.S. national security. Future allies are going to refuse to work with us. Why should they risk their lives if they know we abandon our partners when the mission is over? The Taliban, ISIS-K, and Al-Qaeda will be emboldened. They will use this as proof that America cannot be trusted. U.S. troops will be at greater risks in future wars without local support. Every military leader who has served in Afghanistan understands this. That's why you're going to hear from Lieutenant General John Bradley right after me. Because this is not just about morality. It's about military readiness. So I have a message direct for President Trump. President Trump, you have a choice to make. I do not believe you know what is happening here. I do not believe that you know that Stephen Miller is actively working to dismantle a system that has relocated more than 5,000 vetted Afghan allies per month through safe, legal, secure immigration. I don't believe that you know your administration is about to abandon 3,000 immediate family members of active duty U.S. service members. But you should. President Trump, you have built goodwill with veterans by honoring those who died at Abbey Gate. You put them on a stage at the RNC. You sat with them in their pain, along with your National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. You did a good job with those guys, where Joe Biden failed. You have stood with the troops in speeches and on the campaign trail. You talked a lot about Afghanistan, and you've spoken about loyalty. So do you really want your administration to be the one that throws it all away because Stephen Miller doesn't understand the bond between wartime allies and our service members? Because that's what's happening. This decision is not about strength. This decision is not about security. This decision is not who we are. If you let Stephen Miller win this fight, you will be remembered as the president who turned his back on America's veterans. This can be undone today. You can issue exemptions for those executive orders. You can make sure that CARE knows that its work must continue, and you can make sure that Congress's will is enacted. Congress passed the CARE Act in the last National Defense Authorization Act. Mr. President, it's up to you. Once this infrastructure is dismantled, though, there will be no bringing it back. To every veteran, military family, and American who believes in keeping our promises, please make some noise. Demand accountability. This is not a fight for another day. We cannot be quiet. The dismantling of this infrastructure is happening right now. Call the White House. Call your representatives. Tell them this is a betrayal of our values. This is a betrayal of our allies. This is a betrayal of our own military families. America does not leave people behind. But if we don't stop this, history will record this moment as the day that we did. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. All right. So next up, we have Lieutenant General John Bradley from the U.S. Air Force. Lieutenant General Bradley?
Thank you, Sean. You've laid out the stakes very well here. I'm going to talk about the national security implications. Sean has mentioned a good number of those, but let me just explain. Let me tell you who I am. I served 41 years in the United States Air Force. I did not serve in combat in Afghanistan, but I went to Afghanistan 5 times to visit my airmen who were deployed there. I was the commander of the largest major command in the U.S. Air Force, the Air Force Reserve Command. And on those visits, I got to know Afghans, and I got to know the American servicemen and women who were serving our nation. And I got to see the allies that we had from European countries and from Afghanistan itself. And I got to know many Afghans. And when I retired in 2008, I started a nonprofit foundation. The only work I've done since I retired was to try to educate girls in Afghanistan. I've built 9 schools. My wife and I visited Afghanistan 7 times. We've built 9 schools, and we're running 25 schools now with 25 girls in each school. We're still educating girls to 12th grade. But what I'm here to talk about is the national security implications of the decision that has been made to shut down these programs. These special immigrant visa applicants who are approved to come to the United States and cannot get here now because we've shut down the program are under great threat by the Taliban. But what this tells these allies in Afghanistan and people around the world on whom we may depend in future conflicts is that America does not stand by its allies. We have a moral obligation to help these people who helped us. They put their lives at risk fighting alongside our American servicemen and women. It is very important that we continue to support those who supported us. This was the longest conflict in our nation's history, and we lost too many people. So many were killed, so many were injured, and we owe it to those who served in Afghanistan to continue to help those who helped them as interpreters, as contractors, people who work for the United States. It's in the strategic interest of the United States to support these allies because we need allies in the future when we get in conflicts in other parts of the world. And the message that we're sending right now is that this just doesn't matter. We don't need that, and America's word can't be depended on. We have a moral obligation to do this. Listen, I'm one of the few people on this call that's old enough to know a lot about how we left in Vietnam. I flew combat missions in Vietnam for a year, and I have friends from Vietnam who immigrated to the United States with no vetting at all, and they are great immigrants and great participants in the American economy and good people. The Afghans who we are trying to bring over here through SIVs and P1s and P2s, et cetera, are vetted more than any immigrants in our nation's history. This is legal immigration. It is not illegal immigration at the southern border. These people are vetted more than anyone ever, and we have to keep this program alive, or America's word will mean nothing to future possible allies in the world. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks so much, General Bradley. We really appreciate you coming here today. Next up, we have Jason Kander. Jason, over to you. Oh, you're... Yeah.
Thank you, Sean. And thanks for everything you're doing. So my name's Jason Kander. I'm the founder of an organization called American Rescue Project, which got involved right as the pullout happened in August of 2021, and was sort of an accidental nonprofit that we ended up starting, but ended up getting over 2,000 Afghan allies out. I served in Afghanistan. I was an Army intelligence officer. And look, I can tell you that from a quote unquote partisan perspective, it's important to know that I started this, I started this thing in defiance of the Biden administration. And we had to do at least the first quarter of our work we had to keep it a secret from the Biden administration. So this is not a matter of like, oh, it switched from one political party being in charge to the other, so people are upset. There's not a person on this call who's been universally pleased with anybody who's been running the government from 2021 to now with regard to this issue, right? But as Sean rightfully stated, this group was able to drag the Biden administration into doing the right thing, and was able to get them to set something up that mattered. And from a veteran's perspective, I served in Afghanistan in 06, 07. From a veteran's perspective, it doesn't feel like our country left people behind. From a veteran's perspective, it feels like leaving people behind personally. Because if you are one of the thousands of American veterans, tens of thousands, who is active in this effort, it is because you personally know people who are stuck there and who are in hiding and who cannot continue on with their lives. And keep in mind, it's a 20-year war. So you don't just know the individuals who were willing to risk their lives for you and you for them. You also now know their families, because after 20 years, they have families. When we served with them, most of the time we were young world beaters who felt like we, both us and the Afghans who felt like we were bulletproof. But now they got whole families. And those families do not deserve to grow up there because their parents actually risked their lives and did more for the United States than most American citizens will have the chance to do in their entire lives. You have to understand that these individuals saved every single document that they ever got from the United States or any other coalition partner, because they knew that one day that might have to be their ticket out of the country, because they were assured of that by the United States. And I'm talking like in your workplace, you get the thing that says you completed Excel 5, you completed sexual harassment training, you did that, and you don't like save it. You don't even print the PDF. There's no reason you would. They saved every single example of those things because they knew that that was their ticket to freedom one day if things went south, because they were told that America would not abandon them. And they were told that by people like us because we were told to tell them that. And so the moral injury for American veterans is massive in this situation. The last thing I'll say before I turn it back over to Sean is that, and to echo what the general was saying about, Afghan evacuees, Afghan refugees, Afghan SIVs, the quality of human being that we're talking about bringing over here. Look, in order to get the opportunity to work with the United States in the first place as an Afghan during this war, you already had to be industrious, you had to be educated, you had to speak English. You were already the cream of the crop. And then the ones that are in the system with the loyalty to the people that they serve with, to have the opportunity to come here if this administration reverses these terrible decisions they're making. Now you're talking about not only the most industrious and resilient, but the most brilliant, and people who will add, and already are, and the ones that are here, adding greatly to what we have in the United States. It is a moral injustice to leave them behind, and it is a massively missed opportunity for the United States to do it. So I continue to pray that the administration will see the light and take this responsibility away from Stephen Miller and put it in the hands of somebody who wants to do right by American veterans.
Thank you, Jason. Next up, we have Florence Poya, who is AfghanEvac's youth ambassador, former captain of the Afghan girls robotics team, and a current aerospace engineering student at MIT.
Hello, everyone. My name is Florence Puya. I'm studying aerospace engineering at MIT, and I'm a youth ambassador at AfghanEvac. I was captain of Afghanistan national robotics team for more than 5 years. I came here 2 years ago through USRAP by getting a P1 visa. And as an Afghan woman, I understand the immense hope that so many of us placed in America as a symbol of empowerment and a brighter future. Afghan women and girls have been like, I think recently, especially when Taliban took over, they've been like through a lot. I mean, this regime did not let them to go to schools or university, and they're even like facing some security problems. I think those were the one that during the America, like during the time that America was fighting in Afghanistan, so alongside with your husband or brothers who helped America, or even some of them were directly helping America when it was fighting in Afghanistan. But leaving them behind right now, I think it just a betrayal. And it just shows that America cannot like keep its promise. I know so many women and girls who are here, but your kids or spouses that are left in Afghanistan, or vice versa. Their husbands or kids as minors are here, and they're waiting in Afghanistan to come here. And now everyone says that there is no hope anymore. To give you an example, me myself, I came here as a minor 2 years ago, and my family, they're still in Afghanistan. I've been trying to help them to come here for 2 years, and before the Trump administration, there was like some hope, and I thought like they can be reunited with me soon. But when the administration changed, now it seems like there is no hope anymore. And like me, I'm sure there are like thousands more girls who are waiting to reunite with their family. I think America must reverse this decision and honor its commitment to these Afghan girls, giving them the chance to thrive and contribute to the rebuilding of better future for both Afghanistan and America. Because I'm sure among all those 200,000 people, there are like girls and women that can benefit America in so many ways. They can be like the future leaders, engineers, or technologists. They can be like, and maybe among them there will be scientists who can solve a solution for cancer or do more amazing stuff. So I think this issue is more than just like making a policy. It's about human rights and preserving the integrity of American promises.
Thank you, Florence. Florence, thank you so much. Apologies to everybody who has to go after Florence. She would like to be the first Afghan woman astronaut, and she's gonna do it. She is incredible. All right, next up we have CEO of Refugee Council USA, John Slocum.
Thanks so much. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to speak on this panel alongside General Bradley, the other veterans. I come to you as the son of a Korean conflict era U.S. Navy veteran who served stateside, and the nephew of a World War II naval officer who was present both at Pearl Harbor, and D-Day. So from that tradition of service, I have some inkling of the bonds of which the veterans here speak. As mentioned, my name is John Slocum. I serve as Executive Director of Refugee Council USA, which is a coalition of 42 US-based organizations, including the 10 national resettlement agencies that serve hundreds of thousands of refugees, and there are millions of supporters across the United States. President Trump's executive orders and accompanying stop work orders suspending foreign aid and the U.S. resettlement program indefinitely leave a dark stain on our nation's history. Refugees in the United States and abroad, as well as the communities that welcome them, felt the harmful impact almost immediately. President Trump is doing everything in his power to tear families apart and destroy vibrant communities that welcome refugees and newcomers. Congress must take immediate and swift action to hold the administration accountable for its cruel and unconscionable orders. Congress has appropriated federal funds for federal agencies to work with domestic and international organizations to process, admit, and serve refugees and Afghan allies who assisted the U.S. mission. The deadly impact of the abrupt stop work orders for humanitarian aid and frozen funds for reception and placement services for already resettled refugees and Afghan SIVs cannot be overstated. Eligible newcomers' basic support was suddenly cut off just days before rent was due, while refugees languish in vulnerable and life-threatening circumstances abroad. Just 2 months ago, Congress codified into law on a bipartisan basis the Office of the Coordinator for Afghan Relocation Efforts, or CARE, which facilitates Afghan relocations as part of enduring welcome for our Afghan allies. Congress must do everything in its power to ensure that the administration continues to operate Afghan relocations, which rely on both the U.S. resettlement program and SIV program in good faith. RSUSA commends the refugee resettlement community's pursuit of legal action to hold the Trump administration accountable to restore our moral and legal obligations to refugees and forcibly displaced people in the United States and abroad. Global Health Council v. Trump challenges the Trump administration's freeze on foreign aid, which has left millions of people around the world vulnerable to illness, hunger, and harm. And Pasito v. Trump is the first lawsuit challenging President Trump's indefinite suspension of the U.S. refugee resettlement program, as well as the administration's evisceration of our nation's capacity to welcome by withholding critical, congressionally appropriated funding for refugee processing and resettlement services. Seeking court intervention is an important step, and we encourage all of our elected leaders to stand up and vocalize their support for refugees, Afghan allies, and all newcomers. The U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, the Afghan SIV program, and Afghan relocations are all vital tools for advancing U.S. foreign policy and diplomatic interests, emblematic of our nation's values of compassion and welcome. Their sudden suspension threatens global security and countless lives. Let me be clear, we will not stand down. We will not give up. We have always been a nation that welcomes your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. It is our collective responsibility as Americans to welcome those most in need, offer refuge, and lift up our shared humanity. We must hold firm. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm ready to storm the beaches of wherever you tell me to go now. All right, next we have Ian Patterson from Operation Recovery. Ian.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Multiple tours to Afghanistan. I have been, I was in OAF 6, 7, and 8, and I have been a part of the AfghanEvac since day one with Task Force Pineapple. I'm here to talk on the veterans side and the moral injury, but I'm not going to use my words. I'm going to use words from other veterans that we've engaged with over the past days and weeks. John, as an Army veteran, stated, "Today I am teetering as a human. The mental, physical, and financial pain was unmanageable. Just thinking about being a world away and unable to respond to crisis goes against everything that we were taught in the military. So respond we did in whatever way we could to support our allies. This has now been taken away, or is in the precipice of being taken away." Some other words that we get from veterans: surreal battle against officials, awful moral injury, carrying the load, which we've heard a million times, sadness, injustice, underappreciated, guilt, betrayal, heartbreaking, never been held accountable, delusioning, haunting, soul crushing. These are the words that we are hearing for veterans who have tried to put the 20 years of war behind them and do what was right for our allies and give them the life that we promised them and that they deserved. It is up to the administration and both parties on a bipartisan level to come together to continue the movement of our allies and give them safe passage and the life that we promised. As veterans, we always go by the motto, never left behind. We must keep this up with our allies as well, because the second and third effects down the road that could show its ugly face could be far worse than anything that we've seen in the past. The disillusionment by our allies, if we leave them behind, could turn into a much darker position than what we saw at 9/11 and earlier. We must keep these, we must keep the movement of Afghans to the United States and those who have a pathway moving, because these allies are our eyes and our ears currently that we cannot lose. And for our veterans, the hopelessness, the moral injury, the PTSD, this just compounds into potential higher levels of suicide, which we continue to fight. And that's a battle we're losing. The number's gone from 22 to 44 and so on and so forth as we continue down these roads. This is just going to compound that. So my plea to the administration is to do a deep, dark look and dive into the good of these people, continue the flow of the refugees, the P1s, the civs. These people made a difference. These people made an impact. These people protected our contractors. They protected our servicemen. They were our intelligence. They were our ears. They were our interpreters. They were the ones that kept us alive while we were there. It's our turn in their darkest days to now keep them alive. Thank you, Sean, for having me.
Thank you so much, Ian. Very powerful words. Ian has been a intrepid warrior on this, quiet for most of the time, and has made it very clear he's done being quiet. Next up, we have one of my favorite humans in the AfghanEvac coalition, Cami Rice from Allied Shepherd, who dual hats as AfghanEvac's advocacy lead. I've never seen anybody as effective an advocate in a room with members of Congress as Cami. Cami, go ahead.
That's quite the intro there, Sean. Yeah, so I am a freelance journalist and editor based in Normandy, France. I got into this Afghan work. I spent Christmas 2019 in Kabul. And then as the withdrawal happened, one of the media security professionals that I worked with asked if I knew any journalists who needed seats on a Reuters flight out of Kabul. So if I could help some people, I would. And that's how my work began. And my Allied Shepherd team formed that first week, and we have stayed in the work ever since. As I have, I'm from Upper East Tennessee, very Republican part of our state, of our country. And as I have talked with my mom, updated her on our families that we're still working to get to safety, she said again and again since Trump's re-election that she's sure that if I could just get an audience with him, he would listen to me and understand. So in honor of Afghan and American moms the world over, I too, as Sean did, want to speak directly to President Trump. My mom is not the only person in my evangelical Republican community who wants me to speak to you, President Trump. Again and again, others have said that you would listen to me if I could just get a chance to talk with you. These are people who believe that you want to do what's right by our Afghan allies. And these are the good people who elected you and believe in your goodness and your loyalty to those who are loyal to us and to the people that they want you to be loyal to. As Afghans began arriving to the US in the early days after the withdrawal, and there were reports of churches who were welcoming them, providing for their, gathering home furnishings and clothing for them. I said to my teammates with great excitement, maybe the Afghans will be the people that bring America together. And they laughed at me, but I still believe it, because people across the board want to help our Afghan allies, as our veterans and others in this call have explained. It's just a no-brainer. The evangelical community across the US, from my very Republican district in Upper East Tennessee to friends I speak with in Iowa and Idaho and California, are unanimous in this sense that we should stand by our allies. A church, and these are people too that care about secure borders and stopping illegal immigration and fully support your efforts on that front, but they see Afghan allies in a different category. A church, 2 years ago, my team was working to help a widow. One of the SIV applicants that we worked with passed away, leaving his wife and 3 young sons. And as we were trying to work with them as they were deciding where to go, I knew of a church in my East Tennessee community who had been eager to welcome a family through Franklin Graham's Samaritan's Purse program for churches to welcome Afghan allies. They had not been assigned a family yet. And so when I told them about Karima, they were eager to jump in and welcome her. They've welcomed her 2.5 years later. She's doing great. They have enjoyed that so much that they're ready to welcome another family. That family was going to come through Welcome Corps. They're stuck in Pakistan now, unable to move because of the pause in the refugee admissions program. So again, President Trump, these are the kinds of families that we are urging you to create a path for, to open up the program so these families can come to the churches that are waiting to welcome them. As you know, President Trump, the Christian faith exhorts us to help the stranger and the orphan and the downtrodden. And that's why there is such a tradition, a history, a heritage of Christians in America setting up programs, being available to welcome our allies or to welcome refugees to America. And so on behalf of this Christian tradition and the evangelicals who support our Afghan allies and believe in your goodness, on behalf of my mom, please let her be right. Please keep the pathways for our Afghan allies open. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cammie. Look, before we open it up to questions, I just want to say that AfghanEvac wrote a letter to President Trump, Vice President Vance, and 119th congressional leadership in January 14th, 2025. We said, be so careful with your immigration orders, the broad executive orders, you may have an unintended impact. We know that they read the letters. They didn't heed us, and they had these terrible impacts of these 2 executive orders. We told them February 8th about the national security implications. We wrote to Secretary Rubio, Secretary Noem, Secretary Hegseth. We got a response from USCIS. We have not heard back from the State Department or DOD. Now, we're telling them again. America's veterans, America's frontline civilians, the people who defend our national security care deeply about this. America's evangelicals care deeply about this. 90% of the American public cares deeply about this, believes that this work should continue. AfghanEvac, like RC USA, is a consortium, right? We represent more than 250 organizations, from 2 people to thousands. We represent every part of the American experience, folks that you would never expect to see. Talking about refugees or talking about immigrants, right? Grizzled, conservative veterans who would run through a brick wall to help their guy or their gal, the female tactical platoon commander that stood by them in Afghanistan. Journalists on the call, we hope that you'll write these stories. We hope that if you want to get in touch with current U.S. government officials, former senior officials, or Afghans who are impacted by this, that you'll reach out. We didn't want to put them up in front of the world here. Most are willing to talk on background. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions from the press. Don't be shy, folks. While I wait for people to come off mute or to raise their hands, I'm going to pull up some of my own questions that I wrote for the press. Let's see here. Q&A. Here we go. So, until I see hands. Oh, go for it.
Hi, my name is Ryan. I'm with Dolphin 6. I was in the Marine Corps and on a female engagement team in 2010. So I appreciate everybody for speaking to veterans' affection for Afghan allies. There's a deep affection there. So I appreciate everyone's efforts in this regard. I understand that we feel like we are at what feels like a dead end. So my question is, what exactly are the next steps that we're going to be taking as a community to move towards reconciling this? Is it just, information dissemination? Is that where we're at right now? Or do we have a plan in place as a community to try and rectify this? Thank you very much.
Ryan, to be clear, you're not a journalist, right?
I have a show that I have some episodes. I capture oral histories with special female team members as a historian. So it's a media-oriented series. My first interview was with the commander of the Afghan female tactical platoon. We're pretty close. I work with her. I work with a lot of female tactical platoon members, that CSTs, Lioness. So I would say I'm in an earlier stage of journalism, but I wouldn't discount myself as press.
I appreciate it. I don't want to answer that question about strategy on an open call with a lot of journalists. What I'll tell you is that we're not going away. We're not going to stop fighting. We're going to make sure that we're telling stories. We have a strategy. The next steps on the government side is they have a principals committee meeting coming up. We don't know the date on it, but the principals committee will feature cabinet secretaries, the national security advisor, others, and they're going to make the final decision on whether or not they're going to shut down enduring welcome. So I hope that answers your question. Reach out to me in a non-public manner, and I'll read you in on the strategy. The broader.
I will do that. Thank you very much.
All right. So journalists, if you have questions, let me know. I'm gonna go through a few of the questions that we had written out that we think might be useful to you.
Sean, you have one in the chat.
Oh, good. Reuters reported that CARE will be shut down. Do you have any confirmation that formal moves have been made to implement this? Apologies if you covered this before. What happens to those whose SIVs are approved, and are they awaiting transportation in the United States? And to others still in the SIV application pipeline? Sure. So I'll take the first question. Yes, formal steps have been taken. CARE has been asked to draw up plans to wind down their footprints in Albania and Qatar, as well as clear out housing in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where U.S. government funded housing for people that are meant to be traveling. Now, that said, these are just plans that are being put forward. But there's no plan for what if we take a different direction? What if we keep it going? What if we expand it, right? Faster and more is what we want to see. AfghanEvac focuses on maintaining urgency, increasing throughput, and reducing uncertainty. And we had hoped that when President Trump became president, we would see faster and more, right? Government, more efficient government. But instead, what we're seeing is less secure. This actually, enduring welcome represents the most secure legal immigration we've ever had. In fact, the pathway from a bunch of processing happening on the ground in Afghanistan, going to a third country, and then coming here for ultimate resettlement includes like 8 different checks. In fact, I'll show you a quick graphic here. Let me just pull this sucker up. So these 2 graphics show the types of vetting that people go through when they're going through enduring welcome. On the left-hand side, you have for the consular track, SIV, IV, follow to join asylees. On the right-hand side, you have refugees and SIVs. They're pretty similar, except that PRM, the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, handles the things on the right-hand side that are handled on the left-hand side by the Consular Affairs Bureau, right? So you all should have these. These are all available on our social media. If you want them, I will send them to you. but you can see that there's a very robust vetting that happens for these folks, more so than anywhere else. So my question to Stephen Miller and others is, if we're going to keep SIV going, which it sounds like we are, why wouldn't you continue the platforms? Why wouldn't you continue the relocation? This is much more secure. Let me come over here. You said, what happens to those SIVs that are approved? But are just awaiting transportation to the States? So those are people that are in other countries. There's not a lot of those in Afghanistan because they would have had to leave Afghanistan to get the visa and their passport, and it expires over time. So there are about 50,000 Afghans outside of Afghanistan, some small number of which have approved SIVs. And there are about 1,200 between the 12 to 1,500 between Qatar and Albania that have approved SIVs in their passports. Now, government is not helping transport these folks, and IOM cannot help because the foreign aid pause has been implemented. So people can, in fact, self-fund if an Afghan can afford their own flights and their own housing and to get restarted here in the country on their own with no help, they can do that. But that is a big lift. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. And there are efforts underway to sort of lessen that blow, but we're not ready to talk about that yet. Others in the SIV application pipeline, remember, the COM adjudications are still happening. 1,000 a week decisions are happening. Application intake is still happening. MVST is still packaging up the applications to go over to COM for that adjudication. You can still apply for a visa. You can still interview for a visa. There's just no help to get you from Afghanistan to a place where you can interview for that visa, and no help to get from there to the United States once you've earned your shot at the American dream. And that is counter to what has been happening over the last 3 years. This is the first time in our history that we are meeting the obligation that we have to our wartime allies, ever. There's no question that Joe Biden fucked up the withdrawal. There's no question, for those that can't use that, there's no question that Joe Biden messed up the withdrawal. But the infrastructure that we forced him to build after that is the gold standard for how we should stand by our allies. And it's an investment in our national security and investment in the future. Haley, I see your question. Have administration officials given any indication of implementing an alternative program? No, the administration is not communicating anything at all. The administration won't let their staff communicate. It's taking weeks and weeks for them to clear things, to talk to the press, which is why you're not getting very much when you go through the state media. They're not making clear what their intent is on any of this. And that is causing uncertainty because Afghans are just getting cancellation notices for flights. They're still, like, CARE is still doing the, like, get your travel ready phase. So they're still reaching out to people and saying, hey, give us this form, give us your passport, give us this, give us that. And then on the other end, Afghans are having their flights canceled. So it's really confusing. And it's unconscionable. These folks served beside us. They protected our service members. They are family of our service members. And nobody's giving them good information but us and the people that you see here. And that's outrageous. Sonia from PBS NewsHour asked, you mentioned a number of unaccompanied minors are located in the U.S. while their families are still in Afghanistan. Do you have an exact number of unaccompanied minors and what will be their next steps? I don't, but I can probably get you one. Will they be put in the foster care system? Most are with other Afghan families or with their own families, but some are in foster care. And there's this thing that's happening where foster families are running out of patience. People thought that they were signing up for a few months. And the last administration blew this, right? They didn't reunite these families fast enough. And that's partially because they had to build a new pathway called the DS 4317, which allows people to go into the refugee referral program. But it took them a year to launch the form. And President Trump has an opportunity to be a hero to veterans, to be a hero to those families. And the type of loyalty that will instill is unimaginable. Is there any government level discussion on how to reunify them with their families? There is a government level discussion now on what to do about those families. In particular, very specifically, the 30 children who are trapped on the U.S. government facility in Qatar. With some have caregivers there, some don't. They were on their way here. It's unconscionable, the impact of these executive orders. And it should be very easy to just... Marco Rubio could turn on foreign aid and make that happen now. Marco Rubio and Kristi Noem could today get on the phone and be like, yo, Afghans stood with us. Military families matter to us. Partner forces who fought our war for us matter to us. Prosecutors and judges who put the Taliban away, they matter to us. Female tactical platoon commanders, military intelligence collectors, people who made a difference, who fought for the idea of America and are now at risk, they matter to us. But instead, we're talking about Afrikaners who don't even want to come here. I hope that answers your question.
John, can I jump in on the unaccompanied children question?
By all means.
You know, you mentioned that some of them are in foster care, and for any of them that are in foster care or receiving other services from the Office of Refugee Resettlement, those services have also been subject to their own stop work order. The reporting's come in the last 24 hours. So in other words, you've got those and the other unaccompanied minors in the system from around the world, and then suddenly there's a stop work order.
Yep. It's really, really unconscionable. I want to just make sure we've covered everything here. Look, the last thing I'll leave you with, journalist friends. Oh, and looks like we have a Q&A in here too. One of the journalists asked if we'd had any direct engagement with the Trump administration since it came into office. We have had direct engagement with the Trump administration, but none of them want it to be official. Everybody is scared. And that's a shame. That's a damn shame. I want to just make a point about the lead up, right? President Trump led the charge to negotiate with the Taliban. He brought them to Camp David. They negotiated the Doha Agreement. They let 5,000 Taliban prisoners out of the jails. President Biden blew the withdrawal, right? And President Trump had a lot to say about that. A lot of Republicans in Congress had a lot to say about that. A lot of Democrats too. We saw every single debate, Afghanistan was brought up by President Trump. Every day of the RNC, Afghanistan came up. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and President Trump did an extraordinary job standing by the Abbey families, sitting in their pain. Joe Biden was supposed to be the empathy guy, and he had no time for them. President Biden refused to go to the grave of one of the fallen on Memorial Day 2022. I know because I was there. And President Trump went to those graves in 2024 during the last election cycle. He marched Abbey families out onto the RNC. The craziest thing about all of this is that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and at least one of those Abbey families are still trying to get people out who are stuck because of these executive orders. And a shutdown of care will mean they will never come here. We know that President Trump cares about Afghans, or at least he cared enough to make a big portion of his campaign about them. And so we're kind of at a loss. We need to hear from the administration. We don't know why they lack the courage to talk about this. We don't know why Republicans in Congress lack the courage to be vocal about this. We know that there are several Republicans in Congress who are working behind the scenes on this, doing a good job. We've got letters coming in. We're seeing letters go to the president. And look, I think that it's going to be up to veterans and frontline civilians to make our voices heard on all of this. So, you know, if you're a veteran or a frontline civilian listening to this after we've done our press conference, or this is ending up in reporting, it's on us. This is the issue of our generation, and we have got to stand up and make sure that our voices are heard by this president and his staff. Any other questions? All right, hearing none, we will go ahead and close this out. We will send the recording around to everybody who's on this call and the many reporters that are on my list, unfortunately for them. And we'll make it live on YouTube. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll see you soon.